Hey guys, Josh back with another video, and I got some pretty significant positive feedback on my choice to start re-uploading theory content to my channel, which I was super happy about. So I felt particularly motivated just to hop right back into it. Um, I love talking about poker theory and anything related. Um, yeah. So anyhow, what we'll be talking about generally today is uh, basically range versus range turn interaction in two different configurations on low ragged boards. So uh, I don't know if I've explicitly covered this on my channel. I know this is something that I cover like these sorts of ideas are things that I cover a lot with my students, um, just to understand, you know, how liberated you should feel to value bet some specific part of your range, because ultimately, the broad idea in poker is to figure out um, what part of your range has a significant advantage over your opponent, and then just try to put money in with that. I mean that's in a very broad sense how you generate expectation and no limit. Um, so this configuration is small blind versus hijack three bet pot on 7-7 deuce rainbow. I just chose some low ragged board. Um, so one thing to note. Sorry, this is small blind versus button. Uh, this is yeah okay. So this is this is small blind versus hijack. Um, and this is the small blind three bet range. You'll notice stuff like ace queen off or king queen suited, ace jack suited, ace 10 suited. These aren't at full frequency, and that's because the small blind is doing a decent bit of flatting. Um, and that's because the opener is in early position, so we don't want to reopen very liberally against a range that's significantly tighter. Um, I mean, it's like if your opponent, I mean, the way to put it is like if your opponent has aces and kings, um, three times as often as they would on the button, it would make sense that you don't want to reopen the action to them when you have some sort of like strong middling hand. Um, so that's the idea here, and so I mean, and then when we do three bet, our range is going to be significantly tighter than it would be in later configurations. Um, so basically, like the default size here is generally on the bigger side. We're going to be using a bit more of a polar size. Um, and you'll notice once you get down to something like pocket tens, that's when the frequency sort of starts evening out as far as betting for protection. Like jacks jacks is a hand where um you still benefit a lot from protection. You probably don't want to pile three streets with a blindfold on, but you can still beat quite a few hands, and ultimately like a lot of the stronger pocket pairs as the from the imposition player are going to be like queens, jacks, tens, nines. So jacks beats just enough of those sorts of hands to be able to get a couple streets of value in, but not necessarily want to pile money in blindly. Um, and then when you get down to like tens and nines, that's sort of when things start really. That's when frequencies really start dipping. Um, so if you notice here, like the imposition range is it's going to be quite a few strong Broadway hands: Ace Queen suited, Ace King off, Ace Queen off, Queens, Jacks, tens, nines. Um, so it makes sense that something like tens wouldn't want to just blindly pile a low ragged board like this. Like most of the betting that it's doing, it's just equity denial and folding out overcards and things like that. Um, so after it goes bet call, um, there are going to be a couple turns that are particularly good for the out of position player. Notice that the out of position player is using a lot of this Queen X stuff as a bluff pre-flop. Well, quote unquote bluff. Depends on, I mean, there's no real strict definition of that, but, like out of position is flatting a lot of king queen suited, yet they are three betting queen jack queen 10. I mean, the moral of the story there is really just that if you three bet queen jack or queen 10 against a hijack open and you get four bet, it's not so much of a disaster. I mean, you can just fold. However, king queen, if you get four bet with king queen suited, you're just like you're even dominated by bluffs. Um, but you have a hand that's high enough where you'd rather just try to like flat against an open and try to hit a pair against like jacks or tens or whatever. Um, but if you get four bet with a hand like this, it's pretty disastrous. Um, so the Queen X region of the small blind versus of the small blind three bet range against a hijack open is going to be pretty Queen X heavy. Um, in addition to the Queen X suited. Um, yeah, so after it goes like big bet call and then the turns a queen, out of position is going to be betting quite often, and that's just a function of what I mentioned earlier, being out of position uses a lot of queen X to three bet pre, and then after you bet big on the flop, in position is just folding out a lot of their queen X, like the queen jack suited without a flush draw, just pure folding. Um, Ace queen suited, mostly folding, and then ace queen off, like somewhere around half and half. So a lot of this queen X stuff, uh, doing quite a bit of folding, and then um, whenever you look at something like a king, well, okay, so just to reiterate, out of position in this configuration has a very significant advantage in queen X. Okay. However, when you look at a king, it out of position still has this advantage because out of position still has aces, all the ace king, all the kings. However, in position is calling a lot more ace king off in this configuration. Ace king off, king queen suited. Uh, and they're more condensed to those hands upon opening. Um, but yeah, generally, like the main idea is that imposition is going to have a lot more ace king off than they would in later configurations. So, uh, and then when you look at lower turns like a 10 or a jack, yeah, jack is a bit higher frequency for a similar reason as to why a queen would be. But yeah, once you get down to like a 10, it's really just out of position taking a more polar strategy. Um, what you'll also notice on this very blank turn, um, I didn't plan on putting this into the video, but it's kind of a fun factoid here. So you'll notice queens almost purely betting on something like a 10, and then kings doing a lot of checking. And you might think, oh, well, that's kind of peculiar. Why are kings checking? That seems like the hand that would want to bet. Um, However, we established that on the flop, facing a bigger bet, in position is doing a lot of folding with stuff like ace queen, and then in position is just pure calling ace king off, and then you know king queen with the flush draw, stuff like that. Queen jack with a flush draw, um, and the second thing being that if how to put this, moral of the story being that after you big bet the flop, imposition is going to have a lot of this ace king off on the turn, and this ace king off type stuff is going to be doing a lot of checking, if not pure checking on the turn. Um, Whereas this ace queen stuff, like this ace queen off and ace queen suited that floats, those are going to be the hands that start to turn into a bluff on the turn. Um, so when you have when you have queens, when you have queens in this line, you block bluffs, so you need to bet yourself. Whereas if you have kings, you block checkbacks, so when you check, you get bet into more often, which is a fun idea. It's also the reason that uh, aces are just pure betting. It's because on a board this dry, a lot of the floats from imposition are going to be ace high as opposed to lower cards. Um, so if you like when you bet big on the flop and get called on a board this dry, you're counting on imposition floating some sort of ace high and then turning their ace high into a bluff on later streets in a configuration this tight. Um, I wouldn't. I mean, I would say, you know, most players probably aren't doing that enough. Um, but they probably aren't floating lower cards than ace high enough either. So, what? Who am I to say? Um, Anyhow, yeah. Queen very good. King pretty good. Lower cards not so great. And then this part of the video is going to be quite short. So this is small blind versus button 3-bet pot. What you'll notice is that there's a lot more lower offsuit hands like king 10 off, ace 10 off, ace jack off, king jack off, king queen off. Most of the king queen suited. Um, and then you'll notice a slight deviation in strategy here, which is basically that the small blind, like small blind against the button open, like small blind 3-bet against a button open, going post flop on 7-7 deuce rainbow, the the small blind's just betting significantly more, and that's just because the small blind against the button open is going the small blind 3-bet against the button open is going to be very linear relative to the previous configuration we looked at. Um, when the button's opening 52% of hands, uh, you know, we can continue a lot out of position as a 3-bet. Um, Especially when we have the player in the big blind behind left to act. We're just very incentivized to take hands with a high card in it and um, just try to take the pot down. Um, Whereas, the when the hijack opens, they can only open hands that are profitable raising into uh 4 players left to act. So it's going to be a bit of a stronger range and against the hijack. But against the button here, I mean, we can be pretty loose. Um, so we're gonna have a lot of these lower offsuit hands. Um, so when we see bet on the bigger side and get called, and the turn something like a 10, we're just gonna be range betting, because on the flop, imposition is going to be, well, so first of all, out of position has a lot of this like ace 10 off, king 10 off stuff, 10 9, 10 8, um, and after it goes half pot call, the imposition range has no ace 10 off, king 10 off, um, hardly any jack 10, some 10 9, but very, very low frequency. Uh, we just have a pretty damning advantage here. Like if we look in the Pyro Range Viewer, um, the out of position player here on the 10 has what is this, 16.5% top pair, and then end position has 8.4, so about half. Um, so it's a pretty damning advantage in top pair there. Um, However, in contrast, you'll notice that on the flop, so we noticed in that small blind versus hijack configuration that end position was doing a lot of floating with like ace king off and folding a lot of like the ace queen stuff. Whereas here in this small blind versus button configuration, it sort of flips where uh, the best imposition high card flow is going to be something like ace queen off, um, even a lot of ace jack off, king queen suited, king jack suited. A lot of this ace high king high stuff is going to get make it into the float range. So whenever the turn something like a queen, out of position is going to be using a much more polar strategy, and then the bluffs are going to be hands weighted towards stuff that block queen x. So you'll notice like jack 10 of diamonds doing a lot of bluffing. However, a lot of this king high, just naked king high air doing a ton of bluffing on the turn. And that's because the imposition player has king queen off. So blocking those offsuit combos is important. And then, where did that combo go? Well, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I mean, moral of the story is that the queen isn't nearly as good for the out of position player in this configuration. So, um, yeah, that's sort of the broad strokes concept of the video. Um, Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I uh, conjure the energy to create a few more videos similar to these later this week. But in any event, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys next time.